Hello and welcome to Season 5, Episode 3 of the Sajin Photography Podcast. My name is Jason Teal, and today we are going to talk about the topic I sort of hinted at in last week's episode, and that is, of course, what exactly am I doing as a photographer here in Korea? And that sounds like a big load of mouth garbage. I don't know what I'm really going to get myself into in this episode, but what I want to sort of talk about are the titles that we give ourselves as photographers here in Korea. And by that, I mean, what exactly do we put in front of the word photographer? And often I hear people talk about the quote unquote professional photographer. And often that is a person who may or may not be a good photographer. Now, if you are looking at the textbook definition of a professional photographer, that is someone whose profession is photography. That means that they derive a certain amount of income, if not all of their income, from photography. Now, in this day and age, I really want you to understand that that does not equate to being a good photographer. That means you are a photographer. Now, you are good enough to have a strong client base, yes, and that means that you're good enough to get probably a stable income from your photography so that you are of a high standard. But you really have to understand that that does not always equate to being a good photographer. Now, originally when I recorded this episode, I had a lot of harsh things to say about some people that I know in the industry. I'm not going to dive into that amount of negativity this time. I really want to sort of give my expertise on what it is to embrace your inner hobbyist. And that to me is much more important than trying to measure your appendage size with the next photographer over who you think may or may not be a good photographer. And that's a long-winded thing to say. It doesn't matter if you're a hobbyist or a professional photographer, as long as your passion lies in photography. And I think that is the overriding component to what makes a good photographer, and that's passion. Now, recently on a sort of side note, I was getting into the television show The Bear, and especially season 2. And I don't often watch television, but this one really caught me because I do have a background in the food service industry. I think we've all put our time into either waiting tables or something. Now, what caught me with this episode or the series of episodes in season 2 was the fact that there was an open exchange of talent and expertise where, if you're not familiar with the show, it's about a restaurant and particularly a high-level chef who goes back to his hometown and starts taking over the family business due to a string of unfortunate events, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so in season 2, he sends his staff to learn the craft. So some go to culinary art schools, others meet up with his colleagues from his previous life as a high-level chef. And a few of the episodes where his staff are trained by his former colleagues, they talk about competition, they talk about expertise, but what I saw was this overall general level of respect. They respected the craft. They were passionate about what they did, but they were also sharing their expertise with these people for not like a douchebaggy sort of rivalry thing. They were obviously, it's a TV show. It's not going to reflect real life, but it reminded me of my time when I was training to be a barista, where you would meet people who would show you how to do something, and there was that general respect. So if you were in the industry, they would respect you and they would show you the different techniques to get to their level. And the sad part about it was when I reflected about what it is to become a photographer here, I didn't feel that same level of passion. I think in some cases there's a scarcity mindset that people have here, that they don't want to show you where to get the good locations. They don't want to show you how to get their best shots, because then you might become a professional photographer before they do, or something like that. And that really struck a chord with me. And there's a particular scene where I think Marcus, one of the pastry chefs, was training with a guy that was, I think they were alluding to that he was in competition with the main character. And he talked about, working with this guy, and at that moment he thought he was the best, and then when he met this guy he realized that he wasn't the best and he probably never would be the best. And that really sort of struck a chord with me, because when I was trying to be a professional photographer, I was in competition. I was scared of anyone that, say, moved into Ulsan that was a better photographer, or anyone online that would go to the same locations as me and photograph the same stuff and got more likes or responses, or would say pick up a drone, or maybe they would get into cinemagraphs. And I was really scared that they would be more well known for whatever and take away that precious title of professional photographer. Now, sadly for me, it in some cases it really made me a lot bitter when I saw that these people were getting more respect and whatnot. But what the show sort of highlighted is the guy who, I think his name was Luca. He explained how he realized that he could not beat this guy, and he embraced that guy's talent and he never left his side. And he sort of, the one guy who he's training with, he said, so did you get better? And he said, yeah, I got better than I ever thought I could be by just keeping up with this guy. And I think that's sort of a thing to remember, that we shouldn't be in competition here. We shouldn't be striving for these monikers of professional photographer, or if someone calls us a hobbyist, that's some sort of shitty title. We all should be exchanging techniques. We all should be building this community. And I think that's sort of the overriding thing, that when I look back at what it is I'm trying to do as a photographer here, before I was trying to make a name for myself, I was trying to be the photographer. And when I look at people like Noe Alonso and Dylan Goldby and many of the photographers that I've interviewed on this podcast, I'm never going to be that good. I'm never going to have a cover of National Geographic like, say, Ben Weller or Simon Bond or those guys. I'm never going to get to that level. Okay. I've accepted that. And you say, well, don't put yourself down, blah, blah, blah. You're oversaturated images out your back window while you're standing in your laundry room in your underwear with a cup of coffee. Those are good photos. Yeah, they are. But the reality of the situation is that they're not magazine cover, not National Geographic. Like, they're not going to call me up and be like, geez, man, we saw your talent. The one where you're like shooting out your back window for the millionth time. That's awesome. We want to put that in the cover. Never going to happen. If it is, I'll gladly do a little dance. But the reality of the situation is I'm not going to be as good as, say, Simon Bond or Ben Weller or any of those guys that I mentioned. However, does that make me a bad photographer? No, it doesn't. Does it make me any less passionate about going out to Jongja Beach in the morning with my coffee kit and getting a good sunrise? No, it doesn't. The point I want to make here is that whether you call yourself a professional, whether you call yourself a hobbyist or a beginner or an intermediate or a Weigukin photographer, it means nothing if you don't have the passion. I've seen guys pick up the camera, 2 weeks later, they're walking around a fucking Burger King saying that they're a professional photographer. Yeah, they probably are. But keep in mind that those of us who maybe have embraced the topic of or title of hobbyist photographer still can produce good images. We still can get paid for those good images. And we still can be a part of the photographic community here in Korea. The jock mentality of saying that, someone who's a professional is somehow a cut above those who maybe maintain their teaching positions, but also go out and take pictures in Seoul on the weekends or something like that. There's no level, there's no Stanley Cup for photography, or at least I don't think so anyway. And even if there is, it's still bullshit. And if you don't have passion for photography, if you're simply going out there to be better than somebody, then stay the fuck at home, for lack of a better term. I think what we're looking at here is that if you have passion, whether you call yourself a professional or not, it doesn't matter. The passion is what will carry you through, where you'll receive the most enjoyment. Because if you listen to the other episodes where I talked about going out in the morning, that's where I really feel alive, is when like I'm really just counting down the days till the leaves change, because that's where I come alive. And it doesn't matter if I'm shooting for fucking Visa. What makes me happy is that I can get out and create pictures that I want to create. Now, if you are a person who does have those people on your client list, then great. But I will say that that does not make you any better than another photographer who doesn't. You know what I mean? And if you are, I'll have words, because you're creating images that your clients want to see. And does that make you any better than a person who creates images that they want to see? No. And the reason I say this is because you need to understand that photography is art, and art is not like the Stanley Cup. There's no Stanley Cup playoff douchebag jock mentality where you skate into a stadium full of thousands of fans and hold up your camera and get sprayed with champagne. No, it doesn't happen. Okay, it does not happen. Most of the people that you see that shoot the covers of National Geographic magazine, you probably would never even recognize in a crowd if they walked right past you, and therefore, when we dial all of this back, whether you call yourself a hobbyist or a professional, it doesn't matter. What it is that if you are taking pictures that you are happy with, that maybe people around you like on a secondary note, that's great. But do not, if someone calls you like they did me recently, a hobbyist photographer, thank them. Because I'd rather be a hobbyist than be a dick and treat people like garbage. And I think like in further episodes, but I did talk about it, about building the community here. We're all here doing the same stuff, okay? We may have different backgrounds. We may have different races or different countries that we're from, but the point is that we all share a passion for photography. We all share a passion for documenting our stories here in Korea, and we should be embracing that, okay? We should be helping each other get to that next level. And that sort of touches on that TV show I was watching, where I was really put back by how passionate these characters were. Like if you treat these characters as real people, they were sharing their talent. They were, they had students who had come in and they were showing them how to make these dishes. And I think, like, where is that in the photography industry? Sure, we get like the YouTube Peter McKinnon, what's up everybody, here's how to, and insert the most clickbaity title thing that you can really suggest, because that's how he makes his money. But what I really took away from, this show and sort of that mentality is that because I'm teaching photography now, and I guess maybe I'm teaching hobbyist photography, I stand in the position to sort of be that person, to share my expertise, but to also share my passion for photography to my students. And that's not sort of putting it up on this woo-woo level. What I'm saying is that, like, I can do one of two things. I can do the typical thing, like press this button, set up your shot, and boom, you'll get something. Or I can share the passion. I can teach my students the enjoyment that I get out of going out and actually just taking photos, recording the moments, and making art. Now, with that being said, I'm going to step off my soapbox. I'll talk to you later and see you next week. Keep those cameras clicking away.